My name's Kevin Lynn, Executive Director of Progressives for Immigration Reform, as well as the founder of U.S. Tech Workers. Welcome to another U.S. Tech Workers podcast. We're here with Melody Brooks, who was recently laid off by her employer of 21 years and joined the ranks of thousands of American tech workers who've lost their jobs in a time when our world is getting more and more tech-oriented, a time when we might think more tech positions are available. Situations like what she is about to share have become a silent epidemic in the U.S. workforce. Melody comes to us from a long career in IT with Anthem, one of the largest providers of health insurance in the U.S. Thank you, Melody, for being willing to be here and share your story. It takes a brave soul to share their experiences with the rest of us. Hopefully, stories such as yours will bring the rest of us out of the dark to get curious about what we can do to improve the situation for U.S. tech workers and, frankly, everyone in the economy affected by the impact of thousands of people losing their jobs.
Kevin, thank you for having me.
Before we jump into what happened with the layoff, tell us a little bit about your background so we know more about you and where you're from.
I live in Ohio with my husband, although I was born in Texas. We have two sons, one who has finished college and the other who is still in school.
Have you been a dual-income household all these years?
Yes, that was really important in raising a family and putting the kids through college.
Did you go to college for the IT position you held all these years?
Yes, I graduated with a 4-year degree in math from George Mason University in Virginia, and it had a lot of computer science curriculum back then. I've been in computer science ever since.
In the last 21 years, you worked for Anthem?
Yes, that's correct.
So, not a company that was going out of business that needed to make some cutbacks to stay in business.
No, they are actually ranked number 33 in the highest revenue in the Fortune 500. They provide health insurance for over 40 million Americans.
That's a lot of revenue, especially when you think about the cost of health insurance these days. When you started in IT, what did you love about it?
The satisfaction of knowing that we can make people's lives better and we can make a business operate better. We aren't the flashy people or the ones who talk a lot. I know I'm not the best at communication. I'm more of a worker bee behind the scenes for all the talkative people.
I think that's the case for a lot of tech people. Most of what makes tech workers good at what they do doesn't have to do with verbal communication skills.
That's what makes it difficult when it comes time for us to fight and advocate for ourselves, because a lot of us just don't know how to do it.
And yet, you've chosen to come forward anyway. What motivates you?
I want other tech workers to be brave and come forward, because what's happening is going to continue and get worse and worse.
So tell us, what happened in your workplace at Anthem?
The story began in the mid to late 90s. That's when Anthem started to hire a lot of contract labor on high-skilled visas from overseas. At the time, they told us they were outsourcing the work because there weren't enough Americans to do the jobs in preparation for Y2K.
What happened after Y2K?
Well, you would have thought things would have gotten better, but Anthem only increased the number of high-skilled workers on visas, and they started giving them more of the job responsibilities to them, a lot of the fun-skilled, high-tech stuff. I don't think we were totally aware of it at the time, but I look back and I think a lot of these entry-level positions were filled with workers on high-skilled visas. Eventually, more and more Americans, U.S. workers, lost their jobs and were replaced by laborers on visas.
Melody, for those of us who may not understand the process, can you tell us how a company obtains a visa for a foreign worker?
They are vendor companies who are given a certain number of visas by the U.S. government to bring workers into high-skilled positions. Most of them are from India, and they're on H-1, L-1s, F-1 OPTs, and H-4 EADs. the company that has the highest number of workers on visas is a company called Cognizant. The idea is to supplement the workforce in the U.S. with labor, supposedly, that we don't have. Originally, in our department, the workers came from a company called UST, but several years later, we contracted with Cognizant. You may recognize Cognizant for being in the news after being caught trying to bribe an Indian government official. One of the lawsuits is with the Colorado firefighters who had invested in them.
Were the workers from Cognizant, who you worked with, highly skilled?
Some were and some weren't. I interacted mainly with the Cognizant on-site leads, but the development and coding, that was all done in offshore facilities. Generally, the on-site leads, they were a go-between us Anthem workers and then their off-site workers, which we didn't really meet with. I know a lot of them had to be trained, so they aren't really high-skilled if they had to be trained.
Did you see or know of them doing work you and your coworkers couldn't do?
No, I actually saw some of the quotes from Cognizant. They would quote simple development estimates like adding 1 or 2 fields to a file feed or an interface for 300 hours. If I or another Anthem developer could have quoted, we could have completed in a day or 2 or under 40 hours.
What sort of interaction did you have with the workers on visas?
Most of the interactions were through email or phone and status meetings the Cognizant execution leads would hold. Some of them became my friends and were nice. However, I became very wary when we were told to treat the contracted workers as equals, but only U.S. workers began to lose their jobs, their responsibilities, and their assignments. That's not equal treatment.
When did you notice more and more U.S. workers losing their jobs?
Well, around 2002, I started to notice a more questionable trend. Every year, I would watch a batch of my coworkers and friends, 50 or so at a time, be replaced with workers on visas, and then 50 the next year and 50 after that. The numbers got more.
And you became one of the 50?
Actually, this year I was one of 1,800. 100 in January, 1,000 in March, and I was part of 700 in May.
1,800? Isn't it interesting that an American company who provides health insurance for 40 million Americans lets go of so many American employees?
Anthem employs about 56,000 people. They are building an offshore facility in Bangalore, India that will provide jobs for 4,000 workers there, and then another facility in the Philippines for 1,800.
What are we doing as a nation that allows companies to do this?
There are a lot of theories about why this is happening. Regardless, it is an abuse of the government visa system that has left U.S. tech workers vulnerable to abusive work situations.
All these years you were watching this trend. What were you thinking when you saw this happening?
I felt guilty and terrible every year watching a batch of my friends getting laid off. I had felt guilty that I hadn't gotten laid off.
I've heard a lot of stories about people who've been laid off and have been forced to train their replacements. I can't imagine how stressful something like that is. Did that happen with you?
No, however, it had been my job for years to review and check the work of the workers on visas and send it back to them for corrections.
When did you start doing that?
In 2008, my workload became about 50% coding and then 50% reviewing. I would look at the work from the Cognizant visa employees that they received from their offshore workers in India and send it back and forth until it was correct. Around 2015, though, it got really bad. I didn't do any development or coding any longer. I only reviewed the work of the visa employees back and forth.
So you spent over a decade helping workers on visas improve their work.
Yes, that's right.
That sounds like indirect training to me.
I suppose so. I just didn't think of it that way at the time because I still had a job.
How were you treated as an employee while you were there?
There were no opportunities for advancement or to stay current on technology, as was the case for Cognizant. More of the interesting work went to them. When I spoke up, I got written up, excluded from meetings and other forms of communication. I just felt so isolated and ostracized.
From the outside, a person might observe you saw this treatment happening for years and you chose to stay. Did you ever consider leaving?
I started looking and interviewing, especially in 2012 and 2013, but it's complicated. This has been happening all over in the tech world. Part of how Anthem divided the jobs in IT and the company made the relevance of the skills provided by U.S. workers obsolete outside of Anthem.
How so?
Anthem split information technology and created two categories of employees: digital, which included all of the latest systems, methods, procedures, and websites, coding, all of the creative development. And then information technology, which meant all the repetitive, mundane tasks such as batch processing and maintenance of old systems. Tasks that could have kept us competitive in today's market went to workers on visas primarily. Most of the U.S. workers did all the boring work. One former manager I had, he was picked to move to the digital area. I looked him up on LinkedIn the other day. He now has 5 years of artificial intelligence experience. I don't have that experience to take in the world on a job search. You can Google his name and find papers he's written on the subject. He was given that opportunity when hardly any other U.S. citizens were.
The world of technology has really changed drastically since you entered the field. How has that impacted this situation?
That is part of why I hadn't found a new job when I was looking. I had 21 years of experience in IT and it didn't translate to current times. I would go to an interview and would need to be proficient and have some experience in something like AngularJS, or another would have asked for Spring Boot and I wouldn't have either. I would have to train myself on my own time, and part of it's my fault, so I lost hope and gave up for a while.
I understand. You were raising a family and working full-time too. This situation is a bit like when a bird has had its wings clipped so it can't fly away from captivity, and then when it's set free we wonder why it can't fly because it's a bird. Did you think your situation might get better if you stayed?
I had some hope when Trump got elected that he would do something about Buy American and Hire American, but his immigration interests seem to be about the wall in Mexico. I'm just so angry because all of what is happening now is outright discrimination against U.S. tech workers in the tech field. We were told to treat the workers from Cognizant as our equals, and I did, but we weren't treated as equals. We lost our jobs.
It's a lot to take in. What do you want to happen?
Well, I don't know exactly what needs to be done, but they need to do something. Our Congress and our president, they need to do something to protect the jobs of U.S. tech workers. President Trump promised to put American workers first, but the jobs of U.S. tech workers sure are last.
What do you think will happen if Congress and the president don't do anything to help?
I think the situation will get worse. How would people feel if this happened in their field and they have a mortgage to pay and children to support? How would politicians feel if their jobs were given away?
If more people like you come forward, what do you think will happen?
We would have a chance to do something collectively to make a real difference for U.S. workers.
I'm guessing that a lot of people don't come forward because they're scared. However, other outcomes are also scary. Hopefully this message reaches the people who need to hear it the most, and they will realize that they are not alone. Melody, this has been amazingly informative. I want to thank you so much for sharing your story with me and all the U.S. tech workers. To share your story, connect with us online at ustechworkers.com. If you like this podcast, be sure to give us a thumbs up. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you're kept informed of every new video we add. And lastly, I want to give a heartfelt thanks to the U.S. tech worker community, without whose support we wouldn't be able to bring you podcasts and videos like this. Take care, and until the next time we get together.